Our second topic tonight, which is David Barton explains how teachers can sneak Christian indoctrination into the classroom. Let's look at this. All right, here we go, guys. And I like the graphic I did for this. It's pretty freaking entertaining.
The two easiest professions in which you can do all sorts of Christian stuff in the classroom is in English and in history. Because as an English person, when you're teaching English lit, you can have everybody read Paradise Lost or Dante's Inferno or Pilgrim's Progress or all these great classics. English lit is filled. I mean, Shakespeare's dialogues, he quotes over 2,000 Bible verses. So what you can do is study Shakespeare and just point out the 2,000 Bible verses. Oh, by the way, let's look up that phrase he just said. Well, that's right out of Matthew 7:23. So, I mean, you're just simply using English lit. English lit, you can do a ton of stuff. The other is history. You can go through and give all these read the Mayflower Compact and talk about, hey, they had Christian motivations when they came here because it's in the document. Now, if you read the textbook, all that stuff's taken out. And that's why in 17 states we passed what's called the American Heritage Education Act, which encourages history teachers to post in the classrooms the actual documents, not just the textbooks. But we encourage them to post the Northwest Ordinance, we encourage them to post the Mayflower Compact, Pat McHenry's speech, all this stuff, where the kids actually see the entire document. If you do that, you got a lot of, I mean, quite frankly, the guy I was talking about before, Thomas McKean, who gave altar calls in the courtroom, you could read an altar call and say, here's what was done in 1779 in Thomas McKean's courtroom. It's an altar call. All you're doing is reading history. So there's a lot you can do as a history teacher or as an English teacher. Those are the two areas where you can have the greatest impact.
We've seen a trend from David Barton. He is one of those types of creationists that doesn't just believe that the Bible is literally true, or at least think he does. He is actively trying to subvert secular government, secular laws, and establish theocracy. I don't think he's necessarily, throwing money into political efforts to do that. Not that I know of anyway, but he is at least promoting that idea. And that's really the problem here. It's secular law is what protects all of us from theocracy. And it's people like that we need to be listening to very carefully to what they're saying, because it's very dangerous. In my opinion, there's a sociopathic aspect to what he's talking about. You're also showing how to manipulate the system to get what you want and subvert what other people want, as opposed to trying to convince them why they're wrong. Have that discourse, have that reasoned debate. They're trying to bypass all of that, and it's very dangerous. So it's very good. I forget who made the quote, but the best way to figure out what an idiot is really thinking is just to let him talk, because he'll usually tell you. And David Barton is one of the worst examples of that, and I am highly disturbed by anything that I hear from him. So that's all I have.
No, I totally agree. He's a detriment to at least I should say to our society, to education. It's pretty sad that we have to deal with people like him and Brian Fisher all the time. And it's just we're never going to get over it. I mean, like, as these people get old and they die off, and the Pat Robertsons and these types of people, you got people like, Barton that's coming along, he's fairly, I guess, pretty young, and then you're going to have other people there. It's just, it's sad. We still got to deal with the hatred that these people project, and they don't understand the separation between church and state. They're still going to try to get through some loopholes or create their loopholes, loopholes, push this shit into education. And what's going to happen is they know they're going to get sued. So by the time that takes place, which could be years, they're still going to, push this shit, And what I would like to bring up here too is when he brings up, history and this and that. Well, are they going to teach the history of, like, say, the Salem witch trials? When it comes to religion, are they going to teach that what happened in, say, history, the United States history? Are they going to bring up the Salem witch trials? Of course they won't. Even when I grew up, they actually did bring it up in history class, because I do remember that quite well. When it came to history class, they did bring up the Salem witch trials, which I thought was pretty interesting, because I was just thinking about that. I was like, I learned about that in high school or grade school. Actually, it wasn't even high school; it was grade school. So, like, what it boils down to is, are they going to teach the atrocities that religion partook in? Back then, I don't think so. But the funny thing is, he's projecting like teachers should be doing this. I think there are teachers out there that are actually doing some of this stuff, that are sneaking their religious views into their classrooms. We see it when it comes to creationism. You go down the South in Kentucky, they're getting caught with doing this shit in the classroom. And they're being sued for it. We see it happening. And the funny thing is, like, when you look at Shakespeare, like when it comes to the Bible, the most frequently repeated figure on the books of the Bible is, which Shakespeare refers to 42 books, is 18 of them have to do with testaments, and the remaining is actually apocrypha. If you don't know what apocrypha is, Apocrypha is basically statements or claims when it comes to the Bible, the Gnostic, say if the Gnostic Gospels or Gnostic texts, is they're dubious. They're not real. They haven't authenticated them yet. So they're just claims that they just don't accept when it came into making the canon of the New Testament. Okay, so Apocrypha, if you say 18 of them, of those books that he referred to, 40 out of the 42, you're talking most of them were Apocrypha. This is the research that I've done. So it just, okay, so some of the claims, it's basically not going by what is actually taught in the Bible. Of course, people are going to take that out of context or whatnot. So, I mean, like, and of course, it comes to the books with Enoch, Mary, and the early Christians and stuff like that. So that's all I really got to say on that. So, Ned, I'll point it over to you.
All right. I mean, most of us know Barton and know his, let's say, accurate portrayal of history, and less accurate, I would say. Now, the problem, and I think that a lot of people don't know, if you go back and you research Barton, you look at his early days, there's some really, really early footage on YouTube of him where he is claiming that if you take and look at the SAT scores and how they had dropped off, and I believe it was the early 2000s, maybe late 90s, where this video came from. But there's a decline in SAT scores across the nation. And what he's claiming the reason is because the secular schools, the private schools, have moved away from teaching God in the classroom. And the way that he bolsters that is to say all you have to do is look at the private schools. Because the private schools, of course, their SAT scores didn't wane. They stayed basically the same. And if I remember what he said, it was about an 80-point drop in however many years he had been doing the research. But the private schools had maintained the same. Now, of course, everyone who looks at that goes, now look, if you're going to a private school, you're from more than likely a more affluent family, which means you're going to have more resources. Your parents are probably educated, which means they're going to value education. So it's not an apples to apples comparison there. Even though Barton's claiming, well, most of the private schools are religious, and that's why, because they keep God in the classroom. Now, what is funny though is since he's been called out on that, there would be a very, very easy way to determine if there's any validity to that. All he would have to do is go and look at the scores from the religious kids versus the education from the non-religious kids. See how they compare, where their SAT scores come out. Look at what countries, how the education in a country that is highly religious and has that as a foundation to their public education system, see how that impacts versus a more secular or even an atheistic country. Now, and you can do the same thing with the states.
That's a good point,
the states in the United States. Now, if you do that, without exception, every time you overlay the states and the education and the religious context, the more religious, the less educated, without exception. That's not the United States, that's worldwide. Now, I wonder why Barton doesn't bring that up. I wonder why he isn't pushing for maybe, I don't know, let's take it completely out. I think it's pretty self-evident what he's trying to do here. He does not care about the kids. He doesn't care about education. In fact, he knows the dumber he can keep people, the better chance he has of keeping his religion alive.
Correct. And right on top of that, before we go into Skeptic of the Week, is that, I totally agree with you on that. And this is what these types of people do. They don't care about the kids. They don't care if they're going to dumb our next generation down. They don't care if they're going to dumb them down or make them question creationism on top of evolution. They don't care. It's all about their agenda. That's all. It's all politics. That's all they care about, dude. Because they see their numbers dwindling. That's all they care about. They're oh my God, we're losing the fight. Wow, the secularists are taking control. No, we're not taking control. We're just upholding the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, the secular document, basically what our country was founded on. That's what we're trying to uphold, man. Because we're starting to come out of the woodworks now. Now you're going to have a problem. Now you're going to try to find these little loopholes and create this little tiny, this clique that's going to go in our education system and teach this stuff. No, dude, it's not going to happen. So this is why they're taking such defense. That's why we're seeing more and more and more of this shit in the media outlets, is because they know that our numbers are growing and we're coming out of the closet and we're doing shows like this. It's calling their bullshit when bullshit is made. We're calling the fuck out. So that's what I gotta say. So Ned, if none of you guys have anything else to say, we can get into a skeptic of the week and take a few minute break here before we get on to our third topic.
Yeah.